doing? Really well. I couldn't find my hairbrush today. Hopefully that's not too obvious. Well, it's kind of obvious now I've pointed it out. Anyway, what I wanted to do today is talk to you about different ways of sleeping out when you go bikepacking. Basically, there's always this kind of toss-up between bivvy bags and tents. And I know that when I was trying to find the best tent to go bikepacking with, it just took me hours and hours and hours of research. So this video, not sponsored, but I was sent some of this stuff for free, and the reason I've carried on using it, because between you and I do get sent quite a lot of stuff, is because this is the stuff that I really like and the stuff that I found that works best. So I'm going to talk you through the benefits, the pros and cons of using a bivvy bag versus a tent, show you the ones that I like using, and give you a kind of overview of how best to get a comfortable night's sleep when you're bikepacking. So let's begin by talking about bivvy bags. There is one obvious reason why you would want to use a bivvy bag when you are out bikepacking, and that's because it is incredibly small and light and you don't have to faff around putting anything up. So where's my bivvy bag? This is my bivvy bag. It is from Alpkit. It is the Hunka bivvy bag. It weighs about 350 grams. It costs about 50 quid. It's waterproof. It's reasonably breathable. And the idea is that basically you go inside this in your sleeping bag and then you sleep in a bag. I mean, let's not over romanticize this. Bivvying is basically just sleeping in a bag. Having said that, sleeping in a bag has enormous advantages, not just because of the fact it's fast, quick and light to do so. There are rules against wild camping in, well, many parts of the UK, and if you are in a bivvy bag, essentially you could kind of get away with lying down. You know, you're kind of just lying down having a rest. You put up a tent, you're wild camping, it's illegal. You know what I'm saying? If you want to use a bivvy bag and still get any sleep, in my opinion, you still need to take a sleeping mat with you, because otherwise you are lying on the hard ground bag. Even if you've got a sleeping bag, and lying on that ground compresses the down in your sleeping bag, you're going to get cold, you're not going to get much sleep. I like to put my air mattress inside the bivvy bag, and then I put my sleeping bag on top of that. So then I am super snug and super cozy. Bigger people might find that a tad restrictive. You can get a larger Alpkit Hunka, and if you have a bigger bag, a bigger bivvy bag, then you'll compress the down in your sleeping bag less. You'll have more air to kind of warm up, and actually you'll be warmer. The other thing you need to consider when deciding whether to bivvy or not is, well, the weather basically. So when I went bivvying last week with my friend Laura, we went to a place that was sheltered, it was out of the wind and it was out of the rain. We were in a kind of grotto, so to speak. So we knew that we didn't need anything above our heads. You can get bivvies that have a kind of hood bit that goes over your face, or even some mesh or a kind of hooped bit that gives you space over your head so you can enclose yourself in the bivvy bag. My one doesn't have that, it's just a bag. So if I was going to be bikepacking and I wasn't sure about the weather, I would need to have a tarp to protect me from any rain. So a tarp, I have got this one by Rab. This was given to me, I don't know, 8 years ago when I ran a magazine. This you can string up from a tree, or you can use the wheel of your bike in the place of a pole to erect a kind of shelter over your bivvy bag to make sure that you don't get wet. Obviously, this tarp, it's not a tent. It's not going to stop wind and rain from blowing in the sides or whichever end you leave open. So, you know, bear that in mind when you're making your decision. I mean, if you're planning on doing some sort of ultra endurance race, you could of course do away with the tarp altogether and find somewhere to just quickly bed down in the bivvy bag. You know, you could find somewhere like a bus stop or a bit of shelter where you're out of the way of, you know, the weather, and you could just get your head down, get a bit of sleep and carry on. You're not necessarily going to want to be faffing around with a tent. Well, I mean, there's just no way you're going to want to faff around with a tent if you're doing that kind of thing. If you're worried about bivvying for the first time, really far away from home, maybe do what I did, meet up with a friend and just walk somewhere and bed down not too far from your car so you can try it out for the first time. Moving on from the bivvy bag, the other option you have is, well, it's pretty obvious, it's a tent. So here's my tent. This is also by Alpkit. I'm quite a fan of Alpkit. And this is the Soloist. I think it's such a bargain. It's 120 quid. It weighs 1.2 kilos and it is so spacious for me. I mean, I'm 5'8", so I'm not really tall. But I find that there's plenty of headroom. It's a comfortable, lovely tent to be in. I love this tent. It takes no time at all to put up. It's nice to be in. You're definitely going to be sheltered in there, and there's a lot to be said for that. So let's have a look at the tent and the bivvy side by side. You can see there is a huge size difference here and a massive weight difference. I mean, this is more than how many times heavier? This is nearly 4 times heavier. So, you know, you are taking a hefty bit of kit with you. But if you're the kind of person that gets really cold or is going to be psyched out by the thought of sleeping in a bag, then, you know, the extra weight is worth it, right? But don't forget that if you are taking a bivvy bag, you probably also need to take a tarp. So, I mean, you're still looking at less than half the weight and less than half the volume of the tent, but, you know, just something to be mindful of. So these are the things that you need to consider if you're trying to decide whether to take a tent or a bivvy. Firstly, the weather. Do you need to take a tarp as well as a bivvy bag in order to stay dry and or warm? Will that tarp really protect you if it's going to be really terrible weather, and do you think you can find a place to put your bivvy bag that is reasonably sheltered? Secondly, the psychological aspect of this should not be ignored. Sleeping in a bag and feeling quite exposed and vulnerable is a thing that not everyone's going to feel comfortable with. Sure, a tent is only a piece of canvas, but it does feel really nice in there and you do feel kind of cozy, safer, even though it's only canvas. There's just something about sleeping in a tent that makes you feel better about being out there in the wilderness, and if that applies to you, then take the tent. It's worth having peace of mind, even if you've got to carry a little bit of extra weight. The third thing to consider is, well, how comfortable you want to be and the kind of whole style of the trip that you're on. Obviously, I mentioned before you would take the bivvy bag if you were doing a ultra endurance race, but if you're just going bikepacking with your mates and you're going to be hanging out, cooking up sausages and drinking beers around the fire in the evening, that kind of thing, take the tent. It's nicer. Sure, it's fun to lie in your bivvy bag and gaze up at the stars. There's something really amazing about that. But, you know, take the tent and you can still lie outside in your sleeping bag and look at the stars and then get in your nice tent. Another thing to consider is the kind of sleeping bag you've got. My friend Laura and I were debating whether it's actually warmer to sleep in a bivvy bag or in a tent, because it's actually really cozy in a bivvy bag. But one thing I would be mindful of is having a warm enough sleeping bag and whether your sleeping bag is hydrophobic. Some people get quite wet when they sleep in bivvy bags, because if you get hot and the hot air from your body touches the cold fabric of the bivvy, no matter how breathable it claims to be, condensation will occur and therefore you're going to get wet. For that reason, I would think it would be worth getting a really good quality hydrophobic downfilled sleeping bag, so that if you do get wet, you're not going to get really cold. Additionally, I mean, I wouldn't want to sleep in a tent without a sleeping mat either, but in a bivvy bag, I'd say it's particularly important. You know, you need that sleeping mat underneath you to make sure that you stay warm. Of course, you also need to take into account how much space you've got in your bikepacking bags, or indeed if you have any proper bikepacking bags, or if you're just going to be using a small rucksack. Have you got space for a tent, a sleeping bag that's warm enough, and a sleeping mat, as well as all your other bits and bobs? I mean, that might influence your decision on whether to just bung a tiny bivvy bag in your bag and go. Well, I hope you found this video useful. I'm going to follow it up with a short video showing how I set up my bivvy and tarp using my bike as a support. So I think that would be quite interesting to show you. If I had to buy one or the other, I would go for the tent. For me, 120 quid for that Soloist tent represents pretty good value, and I know that I'm going to get an awful lot of use out of it. The bivvy, it's 50 quid. I'm probably not going to bivvy that much. I'm lucky Alpkit gave it to me, so I have it. But if I had to be careful with my own money and just buy one thing or the other, I'd probably go for the tent. It's more versatile. Which one would you go for? Have you got anything to add to the advice that I've just given? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know about any fun trips you've got coming up. Would love to hear from you all. So yeah, I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you later. Bye.